Hi there, and welcome to Off the Data Provider, an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we're going to focus on understanding the self as well as impression management. Throughout our exploration, we'll touch on key terms such as particular others, direct definition, indirect definition, reflected appraisal, scripts, attachment styles, generalized others, face, impression management, as well as catfishing. While it sounds like a lot, it actually all blends together. In addition to exploring these concepts, I will also provide some tips to help you improve your own sense of self. Also, stay tuned for this week's Ask Dr. Shepard, where we delve into formally ending a friendship. So when we talk about understanding the self, it's important to have a baseline definition understanding of the self. So the self develops through communication with others and is an ongoing process of internalizing and acting within different contexts. So we engage with the perspective of particular others as well as generalized others. So particular others are people who we value in our lives. They're typically family, friends, coworkers, teachers, mentors. These are people who play a vital role in how we define and view ourselves. And so oftentimes, these particular others communicate through direct definition, reflected appraisal, scripts, and different attachment styles. So when we think about direct definition, this is communication that tells us explicitly who we are by labeling us and our behaviors. So I think when I was a child, certain teachers maybe labeled me as talkative. And I talked a lot. My math teacher labeled me while I was growing up smart or brilliant, so I pushed and excelled further in math. My English teacher said maybe that I struggled with reading and writing, so maybe I didn't apply myself as much. Maybe you're talented as a child in a sport, so a coach praises you for that and you focus on that. I was a talented singer, still am, I would argue, right? And so I was given solos. So these direct definitions communicated and labeled me and my behavior, saying I was a great singer, a strong math student, maybe a bit talkative. But when it comes to direct definitions, we also know that with social media, as we think about our communication, has created a term that I would call indirect definitions. And so indirect definitions are actions that do not explicitly label your behavior, but that we kind of implicitly understand to be something. So I think about likes, retweets, emoji comments, or acts of sliding in the DMs may not explicitly state that someone finds you attractive or thinks that you're funny or finds you insightful, but these acts implicitly express these labels about someone. So if we think about back in the day, maybe people still do this. I know I don't, but you would like a whole bunch of pictures by somebody on Instagram and then you would follow them. And that would be a way that you kind of were flirting with that person, letting them know that you found them attractive. You're not saying explicitly, aka direct definition, you're attractive, but you're indirectly defining them through these actions. Or if I am retweeting a lot of your tweets that I maybe find funny or you thought were funny, you might then in turn internalize that indirect definition that I'm funny. So perfect example is posting pictures on social media. If they get a lot of likes, a lot of retweets, a lot of engagement, you might think that you are attractive if the picture that you shared was a picture of yourself. But if they don't get a lot of likes, if they don't get a lot of retweets, if they don't get a lot of engagement, then maybe you don't find yourself to be as attractive. And what's potentially dangerous here is we just know the algorithm works in mysterious ways. So I like to have fun with it, especially on Twitter. When I post pictures of myself, I try to sometimes post them late at night when I believe most people won't see them. I also sometimes will post them in the middle of the day or right when I'm waking up. And sometimes based on the algorithm, they'll hit and they'll get a lot of likes. Sometimes based on the algorithm, they won't. But I myself, having worked on my sense of self, do not take in these indirect definitions. Okay, if the picture got 1,000 likes or the picture got 10 likes, because it got 1,000 likes, I'm attractive. Because it got 10 likes, I'm not. These are things that we have to work on in our sense of self and hopefully not allowing them to define who we are. But when we are able to understand that our sense of self, of course, arrives from interacting with these different contexts, you can then take it a step back and break it down. So clearly, I did that in this indirect definition of social media posting of pictures of myself that, okay, it really could just be the algorithm. Maybe not a lot of people saw it, so that's why it didn't get a lot of likes. Or it got a lot of likes. Okay, maybe it was the algorithm. Doesn't necessarily say anything regarding my physical appearance or attraction. So as we said, right, our sense of self comes from these particular others. These are the people who we value in our lives. So you might value these followers, or if a certain follower likes the picture or retweets the picture, it might mean more than somebody else. And when it comes to how it's communicated, right, we went through direct definition and then kind of a tangential, excuse me, clearly butchering that word today, but a offshoot of direct definition, which I'd label indirect definition. We also then have reflected appraisal. So these are our perception of another's view of us. So others are oftentimes mirrors of us and influence how we perceive ourselves. So we have social comparison that we do where we assess ourselves in relation to others. And of course, from this also comes self-fulfilling prophecies where we might internalize others' expectations and behave consistently with them. So when it comes to social comparison, where we gauge ourselves in comparison to others, I often think about the concept of compare and despair. So when you are comparing yourself to someone, you're really just comparing what you view as who they are, that sense of self that you've gathered, that face that they have put out to the world. And we'll get into face and kind of front stage and backstage. So when we are usually doing social comparison, we're comparing that front stage, so the actions that are visible to others, but you oftentimes don't know what has gone into creating that moment. So a perfect example, I had a deep discussion several years ago where someone was saying that me getting a PhD at 26 was super impressive. And while I believe that, yes, it was impressive, if we take a step back with the social comparison, you have to realize that I didn't have any demands at home, meaning when I graduated from undergrad, I didn't have to get a job right away and make money to help contribute to a family. Right. I also was fortunate to be in a financial situation where when I was in grad school and the stipend wasn't enough and you're not technically allowed to work, my parents were able to give me some money every month to help so I could live in LA, not just survive, but live a little bit. So clearly, if someone is comparing themselves to me in my track, right, I graduated high school early, I graduated undergrad early, I would have graduated my PhD early, but that's another story for another day. It seems otherworldly, but there was such a support system behind that made it so. But if you're just comparing my front stage appearance, well then yes, it's amazing and you're not doing enough. But then when you take a step back and see everything that helped build me up, I always tell people the pathway was exceptional. I'm not saying that I didn't put a lot of hard work in, but I am not quote unquote exceptional. The pathway that I was put on, the support system, helped me. But that, of course, takes time to not just compare the outward appearance, but think about what went into it. So when we do this reflected appraisal, when we're mirroring and we're using the social comparison, we usually don't compete where we don't compare. So nobody is on my level to quote unquote compare, right? There isn't someone my exact age who had the same financial circumstances, same upbringing, same educational background as their parents. So it would be very unfair for me to compare myself to somebody else, and also on the flip side for someone to compare themselves to me. But we oftentimes don't do this. So if you're starting a new career, you might compare yourself to somebody in the field and be like, oh, I'm not doing enough. But you don't know what they have done, maybe what they haven't done, what struggles that you have that they didn't, or vice versa. So social comparison can be dangerous here, right? So compare and despair, as I say. So decide first if you're similar or different to this person, and then maybe gauge your ability in relation to them. So another perfect example, if you want to be a performer and you just started performing yesterday, you probably shouldn't compare yourself to Beyonce, who's been doing it for well over 30 years. It just wouldn't be a fair comparison. And then when it comes to that self-fulfilling prophecy, we know that we internalize others' expectations and behave usually consistent with them. So oftentimes if a child is labeled unintelligent, not smart, they probably won't apply themselves. They've internalized these teachers telling them that they're not good, that they're not going to do well, they're not going to excel, and therefore they don't apply themselves, and then they don't do well. And I see this firsthand even in the classroom where I have students, and I am hopefully they feel this way, I would say so, as my mentor and I call them repeat offenders. Right? I have a lot of students that will take any class I have because I believe that everyone has a gift and everyone has a particular perspective that can add insight to us on these concepts. And so sometimes students will come to me and say, nobody's ever pushed me. Nobody's ever seen what I can offer. And this is at the college level. So you're thinking 18 years, what is it? You start school around 4 or 5. So 13 plus years of education and no teacher has ever pushed them. So, or seen something in them or put expectations on them, said, I know you can do better. I see the potential. So we also need to be aware of that reflected appraisal, right? The social comparison, not great to do. And also self-fulfilling prophecy, especially when we're young, can be really harmful. So we should be mindful of that as well when we are labeling people, especially children and young adults, these things, that they might just fall into these traps. The other term, right, scripts that comes from how we understand our sense of self are usually rules or equipment for living that we're given and we identify with. And these are formed early on, around the age of 5. So as adults, we have the ability to review and change identity scripts that no longer identify or fit who we choose to be. So when I think about scripts, these are the equipment for living. Shout out to Kenneth Burke, right, a rhetorician who came up with that term, I believe USC as well. And these help us move throughout the world, move throughout life. So we know, for instance, usually a script, especially here in America, is you walk on the right side of the street. So if I'm walking on the sidewalk, I'm walking towards the right and the other person's walking towards their right. So we're not walking on the exact same side of the street, if that makes sense. Or when you're going on the bus, you wait for people to come off before you go on. Or when you get on a plane, usually you wait for the row before you to get their stuff before you get off, right? These are just rules, equipment for living that we identify. The simple, basic ones. You clean your plate. If you have a dishwasher, you then put the plates in the dishwasher, right? Or if you don't have a dishwasher, after you eat, you wash the plates, put them back, wash the utensil, right? Things that we learn how to maneuver and how to operate. And so when I think about when people talk about, quote unquote, doing the work for me is revisiting these scripts that you've learned from such an early age and seeing which ones work for you and which ones need to be adjusted or fixed or changed entirely. So clearly you're not the same person you were at 5. You're not the same person you were at 10, 15, 20, even 30, even 40, 45, 50. You're changing. So your script should also change. And one script that I think is really important to think about is kind of our friendship scripts. So when we grow up, we kind of treat friends all the same. We have certain rules that all friends need to abide by. And as you get older, you hopefully realize that friendship is more nuanced. And so what works for one friend might not work for another friend. So clearly your script is going to have to change. Now, of course, there are probably rules that you hold all your friends to. You don't want them to lie to you. You don't want them to betray your trust, your confidence. You want them to show up for you. You want them to be invested. But what that looks like, the degree, the frequency, all of that changes. And so your script changes as well. One script, right? One of my best friends and I, we talk about this or we joke about this, is she has a script where if I'm not friends with somebody, then you're not friends with them, especially if I've introduced you to this person. And so that's her script, and I abide by that. Where I, on the other hand, believe that if I don't like a person anymore, I had a falling out with a person, just because I had a falling out with them doesn't mean that you have to, because you might be getting something beneficial out of that relationship. Now, my script and what I believe in my friend is clearly I'm not friends with that person anymore. That's fine, but you can be friends with them. I do, though, expect you not to talk about me to that person or not allow that person to talk negatively about me to you. So we can see how scripts change, how they evolve, and it's important as we quote unquote do this work that we change and evolve those scripts as well. And then the last concept that helps inform our sense of self is clearly our attachment style. And so attachment styles are patterns of caregiving that teach us who we are and others are, as well as how to approach and engage in relationships. So there are 4 different attachment styles that are often talked about in psychology. There's secure, there's fearful, there's dismissive, and there's anxious. So when we think about a secure attachment style, this is when a child is given consistent, loving attention. So they are given a positive self-worth, I am lovable, and they have a positive view of others. So people are lovable and can be trusted. On the flip side, we have fearful attachment style. So this is when a child is given usually unavailable or negative communication. So they oftentimes have a negative self-worth. They feel unlovable, and they have negative views of others. So people aren't loving and are untrustworthy. So we can see that's a total 180, secure versus fearful. So secure, the child internalizes that they are lovable, that they deserve love, and on the flip side, they also believe that others are loving and lovable and can be trusted. Fearful, on the other hand, unfortunately, they are made to feel unlovable, unworthy, and they also feel that other people are unlovable and untrustworthy. Then we have dismissive and anxious. So you could already tell maybe if you were looking at axes that these are kind of flips. So dismissive is when a child is given disinterest or rejection, but doesn't internalize a caregiver's unlovable views. So they have a positive self-worth of themselves, but they're dismissive, of others as unworthy. So a child grows up in a negative linguistic environment, aka they are oftentimes chastised. They are labeled negative words, bad, not smart, uncaring, unlovable. Think about all these negative adjectives that could apply to a child. But luckily or fortunately for their psyche, they don't internalize that. They know that they're lovable and they are worthy of love. But because they're consistent negative attention from their caregiver, they're dismissive of others and believe that others are unworthy or unlovable. And then we have anxious attachment style. And so this is when a child is given inconsistent attention. So they realize that others can hurt them and be unloving, but that others can be loving and affirming. So oftentimes those that grow up in an anxious attachment style can be inconsistent themselves. So one day they might invite affection, but the next day they might rebuff or deny it. So when we think about these different attachment styles, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how did I grow up? How did I internalize or not internalize the views of others as well as the view of myself? And that's really important to help us understand ourselves. So did you grow up in a more positive linguistic environment, potentially secure one where you have a positive self-worth and a positive view of others? Did you grow up maybe in a negative linguistic environment where you have a negative self-worth and negative view of others? Did you grow up in a dismissive attachment style where you were given disinterested or rejected attention and you fortunately did not perceive a negative self-worth, have a positive self-worth, but you have a negative view of others? Or did you grow up in an anxious attachment style where your parents were a bit hot and cold, or caregivers, I should say, were hot and cold? So sometimes you feel as if you're lovable, sometimes you feel like you're not. Sometimes you feel others are worthy of love, sometimes you feel like they're not. I would say, unfortunately, a lot of people, as we grow older, realize that maybe they didn't grow up in the best attachment style. And so that's also part of doing the work, is recognizing, unfortunately, maybe that you were let down or not necessarily fully assisted by those particular others, those caregivers in that attachment style. And so doing that work to unlearn what you had internalized. And so, as I said before, we have our understanding of self from particular others, and those give us those direct definitions or indirect definitions, those reflected appraisals. They help teach us those scripts. We grew up in those attachment styles. But then we also have a generalized others. And so generalized others are essentially the overall society. So it's culture. And so culture helps us learn who we are through interacting with others who have internalized cultural values, who participate in institutions that embody these cultural values. So work, school, as well as engage with media. So I think about representation here is a big one. So what do you see in media about characters that look like you or look similar to you and how they're treated? As you grow up as a child, do you internalize that? Do you feel as if you're unworthy of love because the character that looks like you is treated poorly? Do you not see yourself at all in the landscape of media? And so we see a lot of people push and talk about representation, how important it is. And it's super important, I think, especially for children, how they internalize who they are from the overall society, as well as these different institutions. So for younger kids at school, well, how is school interacting with you? What is school telling you about yourself? Are you smart? Are you lovable? Are you caring? Are you talented? Are you athletic? Are you, insert positive adjective upon positive adjective? Or on the flip side, are you maybe some negative adjectives? And how are you internalizing these as a child? We also know that identifications along race, class, gender, sexual orientation, geographic location can also influence who you are or who you want to purport to be to others. And this, of course, brings in impression management and the concept of the face. Right? Goffman introduced us to the concept of the face back in, I believe it was like 1959 and 1967. And the face is essentially the sense of self that you want others to acknowledge and accept when you're interacting with them. And so we use impression management as an effort to persuade others to believe in the face that we present. So you don't have complete control over the face that you present as others interact with your face, and they can either confirm or challenge it. So when it comes to the face, you have front stage. So these are the actions that are visible to others. And then you have backstage. And so these are actions not typically visible to others. So for me, I think about your face as a play or a musical, if you've ever seen one live. And so the face is what you're presenting to the world. It's what the performers are doing that everybody can see. But backstage, it's what the stagehands are doing, the designers, the directors, the choreographer, the wardrobe, the makeup. These people are all doing actions that aren't visible to us, but are helping put forth the visible face that we can see, that front stage. So even in life with the faces that we present in person, you have friends that can either confirm or challenge. So if you're hanging out with a group of friends, a friend can either confirm your story and giggle with you, or they might challenge you and say, is that really what happened? Are you sure that's what happened? Because I heard something different. Right now, they're challenging your face that you're putting out. Or I think about social media. Oftentimes when you're engaging with people, they can either confirm what you're saying or doing, or they can challenge you. And you might go back and forth with them a bit on it. So it's important to consider and think about how in life, nobody's ever going to be able to see the complexity that is you, and you can only show up so much as that situation allows you to. So for instance, social media, I always tell people, is just a snapshot of who you are. It's not the totality of who you are, right? It is a snapshot in time of a moment, and that cannot capture your full vivacious self, but it can capture portions of it. So for instance, currently I am, my DMs are on fire, my mentions are on fire on Twitter because of things that I've said about COVID, right? And calling out things regarding COVID, right? I'm COVID informed. I, wear my mask all the time. And so people are upset at the simple fact that I was excited that my friends came over and immediately went for a COVID test to test themselves to protect me, right? Why people are upset about precautions that I take to protect myself. I can't explain to you why, but they are. And so they're challenging, some of these people, quote unquote, are challenging my face, right? They're calling me names. They're calling me out, saying I don't have any friends, saying I'm making this up, saying the R word to me, calling me different slurs. And so, of course, they don't know who I am. So I'm not bothered by it. I just am muting or blocking them. I think I quoted one person because I just wanted to have a laugh. But they are challenging this impression that I'm putting out, that I'm happy because I have friends that care about my health and are willing and able to take COVID tests because that's the requirement to hang out at my house, right? There's no issue there, in my opinion, but clearly they have an issue with it. These generalized others, right? They're not particular others. They're not people I actually know, not people I actually care about their opinions. And so the people who I do care about have commented, have messaged me, have texted me, have checked in on me to make sure I'm okay. And I am. And some have gone online, the front stage, right, visible to others, and backed me up on what I've said. So what's important to realize with impression management and the face is it's the sense of self that we want others to acknowledge and accept, but they don't have to accept that. And oftentimes, especially when we think about social media, that face that you put forward will be challenged by people. And those people oftentimes will be generalized others who don't know you. And so how you choose to respond will either further challenge that face that you're putting forward. It might confirm that face to people. But I also put on my public speaking hat for a moment, and there is no universal audience. So whatever face you're trying to put forth, not everyone is going to accept. And it's important to realize that as we think about our sense of self, that not everyone is going to accept it. Some people are going to challenge it. Some people are even going to hate you for it. Perfect example, me celebrating my friend taking a COVID test. Why are you upset or hateful at me about something I do in the privacy of my own house that you'll never be invited to? Right? But they are. So I'm secure in my sense of self where maybe a few years ago I might have been spiraling out, or I might really have a big issue, or I might be having a breakdown around it, and I laugh about it. I went viral again, what was it, 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, where I posted a screenshot of a text message exchange. And I had a friend call me and was like, are you okay? Like, you have over like 5 million impressions with it and people are being really rude. And like, I picked up the phone and I was like laughing and I was joyous. And he was like, wait, what's going on? I was like, nothing, what's up? We have to realize and detach ourselves with this impression management that you're not going to be able to persuade a lot of people. You have to be confident in what you are doing. And as the quotes say, right, the girls that get it, and the girls that don't. And so for me, when it comes to face, when it comes to impressions management, the people I care about, those particular others, they get it. They understand who I am. They understand what impression I'm trying to get out. And they will assist me both front stage as well as backstage, right? So front stage, the actions that are visible. So they'll retweet or they'll engage or they'll quote unquote take down some of the people that are coming at me. And backstage, right, they'll check on me. They'll make sure I'm okay. And so that's important to consider and think about with impression management. And before we move on from impression management, it's also important to call up this concept of catfishing, where people are pretending to be someone that they aren't online. And this has become a growing problem online and is really just an evolved practice from Groffman's original theorization of the face, right? The face, as we know, is just the impression of self that we want others to accept. So even with catfishing, you are putting out a face that you want people to accept. Oftentimes, it might not even be your actual face. It might be somebody else's face, or with all of the software that we have, all the technology, the AI of it all, it might be an edited picture of yourself that you really don't look nothing alike. So with online communication, we have the potential for manipulation and misrepresentation, right? We can edit, we can re-edit, we can delete, we can filter our own comments, we can change our own appearance with apps like Facetune, with different filters online. So people who catfish their persona might rationalize it behind various things regarding revenge, self-esteem issues, escapism, entertainment. And these are kind of growing phenomena as the technology continues to get out of hand, as some people might say. So the concept of catfishing as it comes to the wider public came from someone not looking like who they are, pretending to be somebody else, but maybe using their real personality behind pictures of somebody else. But catfishing to me has really evolved where you are manipulating and misrepresenting who you are. So maybe you are using your own pictures, but they've been edited in such a way that it really doesn't look like you, or you're using pictures that you no longer look like. So I know a lot of people are guilty of that, especially maybe on dating apps where they're using outdated pictures because maybe they feel as if they looked quote unquote better than. And usually that quote unquote better than is they were skinnier or they didn't weigh as much, right? Shout out to the anti-fatness of it all. And so it's just not using someone else's pictures and being yourself behind it. It's using your own pictures, but they're not really your own pictures, or misrepresenting what you believe or feel. Acting a certain way online versus offline, right? I've had interactions with people where I couldn't stand them online and we happened to meet offline. They're a totally different person. And I've called them out on that sometimes. We're like, hey, online you're really abrasive and argumentative, but in person, you're really kind and thoughtful and engaging. Like, what is that? What is that about? So when it comes to catfishing, I think it's important when we think about our sense of self to expand our definition. It's just not someone else using pictures of somebody that they're not, and then being who they are behind it. But it can be you using your old pictures that aren't really who you are. It can be you acting a certain way online and being totally different offline. I've also seen people talk about online how like people are much bolder. Like you'll say this online, but you'd never say it to my face. And so hopefully as we become more ingrained online, that people become more confident and comfortable in showing a little more of themselves and not hiding behind potential catfishing. And so that brings us to the last part of this podcast before the Ask Dr. Shepard about how we can improve our own sense of self. So I think first and foremost, you have to make a commitment to personal growth. So you have to invest energy and effort to bring about whatever change that you want. And what's important to realize about growth is that there are setbacks. Growth is a long-term process, and we shouldn't let setbacks undermine us. So sometimes what happens is, let's say your goal of self-improvement is you want to lose some weight. So maybe you go to the gym and you lose 2 pounds in the first week and you're excited, and then you lose a pound the next week, and then you gain a pound the week after. And now you're set back because you gained some weight back, or maybe you gained all the weight back. Well, no, growth is not linear. It just doesn't go up, up, up. Sometimes you take steps back. Sometimes you take falls back, but then you might take leaps forward. And so as long as you continue to commit to that growth, whatever it is, it eventually, hopefully, will work out for you. So first and foremost is committing to personal growth. I also think when it comes to that commitment of personal growth, you also want to seek an environment that supports your change. So you want to surround yourself with people who will keep you accountable to your change. So if I want to maybe lose some weight, or maybe I want to eat healthier, I want to make sure that my support system is aware of that and they can put me in check. We also, a part of that support system is avoiding self-sabotage. So telling ourselves that we're no good, we can't do it. We know from different studies that the language we use allows for a more beneficial and healthy environment. So if you use more positive language towards yourself, you are going to feel better. You're going to create a healthier and more beneficial environment for whatever change you're doing. So for instance, if I want to maybe read more, maybe there's a week that I miss out on reading a book. Maybe I committed to reading a book a week. That week was super tough. And so instead of beating myself up, maybe I say, oh my God, I committed to reading a book a week and I've been doing it for a month. And okay, I only read 2 books instead of the 4 I wanted to, but that was 2 books more than I would have if I didn't actually commit to this change. So it's about shifting that mindset, being positive, seeking an environment that supports your change, both with the people around you, but as well as from your own sense of self. We also know that to gain and use knowledge to support personal growth can be really effective. So to understand your identity and how it was formed, you want to talk to those particular others as great sources of both knowledge as well as models. So talking to your parents about your childhood and maybe some of the trauma that you had from it can be a great way to acknowledge it, can be a great way to work through it, both with them as well as separately, and then to further grow and blossom from it. Also, finding others to serve as models. So maybe someone is doing something or has done something that you want to do, actually talking to them, maybe asking them to serve as a mentor. So, perfect example, when I did my PhD program, I was fortunate enough to have a mentor in Dr. Dawkins, right? Shout out to the great Dr. Dawkins. She already got a PhD. She got a PhD from the exact program I did, in the exact discipline I did. And so having her serve as a model and showing me things to maybe avoid, things to focus on, allowed me to get my PhD and get it in a healthier way than if I didn't have her to help serve as a model. So I clearly gained and used knowledge to support my personal growth, in that regard, my intellectual growth, from Dr. Dawkins, right? She recommended when I did qualifying exams, for instance, it's when you sit and you read a whole bunch of books and a whole bunch of articles, and then you kind of regurgitate that information in a short period of time, that it would be smart to create these 2-page overviews of the articles or books that I read with the key concepts and maybe some key quotes and key terms on them. And so I did that for each one. I still have them today. So if I want to revisit a book, I just go to that 2-page summary I created and I can scan that and I basically get the gist of the book. Now, I might go back and reread the book as well and see what speaks to me now, but that little piece of wisdom has served me so well as I'm almost at my 10th year PhD anniversary next year, right? So that is what I would offer to helping improve your sense of self, right? First, you want to make a commitment to that growth. Then you want to clearly seek an environment that supports your change, whatever it is. And you also want to gain and use knowledge to support your growth, usually from understanding how your identity was formed. This will come from your particular others, as well as doing some introspective self-work and finding others to serve as models to help you attain the growth that you so desire. So this was kind of an overview when we think about understanding the self and impression management. This is somewhat bordering on intrapersonal communication, but intrapersonal communication isn't a huge discipline that's oftentimes taught on its own. So it's oftentimes rolled into interpersonal communication. And of course, it's really important to have a strong sense of self to have better interpersonal communication. So with that said, we will move now into the Ask Dr. Shepard. So for this week's Ask Dr. Shepard, it comes from Dana. And so Dana says, I have been having issues with a close friend for a while now. We've been friends for over 5 years, but I've felt us drifting apart slowly over the last 6 months. I brought this to my friend's attention and she brushes it off and says I'm over-exaggerating. With that said, I feel like she hasn't been there for me during some really hard moments these past few months, and it's gotten to the point where I resent her if/when we hang out. I've thought about it for the last month, and I've decided I don't want to be friends with her anymore, as we seem to be moving in totally different directions. She seems to be getting more invested with her boyfriend and other friends, and I'm focused more on work and other friends as well. Since we've been friends for over 5 years, I just don't want to ghost her. And since listening to this podcast, I want to be more ethical and effective with my communication here. So what should I do? Well, Dana, thank you for this question. I know ending friendships, especially friendships over a prolonged period of time, can be difficult. I've had to do it myself. I've ended, about 2 long-ish term friendships. About 5 years or so friendships actually within the last few years as well. And so it can be difficult, but it's also a very important conversation to have. As we've talked about in an earlier podcast, sometimes we have friends for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it just seems like you and this unnamed friend are just season or reason friends, and that's okay. It doesn't diminish the impact that the friendship has had on you. It doesn't take away the memories that you've created, the history that you've shared, but it's clear that you've probably reached a point where maybe it's now time to depart, to step away. And so this friendship, I think, clearly deserves a conversation. I would say, if possible, I don't know, geographic wise, if you guys are close to each other, right, live in the same city or close to cities. But I would say this deserves it face to face if you can. One of the friendships I had to end was in a totally different state and city. So we actually did it over the phone. But if this person is close, I would say do it face to face because I think they deserve that. The 5 years of history that you share deserves that. And I would just share with this friend that you feel as if you both are clearly moving in different phases in life. And it seems as if this is a phase where you are drifting apart. And you've thought about it, and it feels as if you've been trying to hold on to this person these last few months. And when you have brought that to their attention, they've kind of told you you're over-exaggerating, and you personally don't feel like you're over-exaggerating. And as I always tell people, your feelings are valid. Doesn't mean that they're factual or true, but they are what you feel. And so you feel as if she's been pulling away, and you feel as if you've been making advances to try and mitigate that, but it hasn't worked. So I would just let her know that in simple terms. You also tell her that you truly appreciate the friendship, that you have benefited from it, because clearly you wouldn't have been in a 5-year friendship with this person if there weren't benefits. You can maybe reminisce on some of the great times. I would say, depending on how you feel, leaving the door open to maybe reconnect when you are in different places or spaces in your life, because maybe you come back together. Or if this is not someone that you're interested in leaving it open with, then make it clear that while you appreciated the friendship, you both are just moving in two broad directions, and that you don't want to feel like you're forcing something to work anymore, and you genuinely wish them the best and no hard feelings. You appreciate them, that you realize that friendships don't always last a lifetime, and that you're thankful that this person saw you through this phase in your life. So these are just some words, some terms to use. I would also stress use I language. So I feel, don't accuse the person. Just say, I feel this, I feel that. I feel as if, perfect example, I feel as if when I brought to you that I felt like you were being distant, you brushed it away. I don't know if that was your intention, but it made me feel as if you didn't care, right? So you're allowing there to be space for conversation to exist, and you're not accusing the person of, you're dismissive, you don't care about my feelings. You're saying, when you did this thing, it made me feel as if. And it is a slight change in how you speak, and using I language can feel very funny when you first start doing it. But if you incorporate it in your dialogue daily, it becomes second nature when you have disagreements. And so I know when I've had disagreements with friends, with family, I always now rely on the I language, right? Because this is how I feel. You can't tell me how I feel is wrong. But what we can have a discussion of is the implications of those actions. So I might feel like you're being disrespectful to me because you're always late, but that might not be your intention. And so how can we work through that? But clearly you're not trying to work through anything. You're trying to end something. So I would say use I language, be upfront about how you feel, be grateful and thankful for the time that you did spend, and it'll be your choice to see if you want to leave it open or not. So hopefully that helps, Dana. I'd love to hear an update if you would provide it. And with that said, that is the end of our latest episode of Off the Data Provided, and I hope to hear you and see you on the next one. Have a good one.